Good afternoon, John.
Hi, Marty.
Good to see you again. It's been a few weeks.
It has, yeah.
I don't know if you got any feedback from our followers, but several people were unhappy that we didn't let them know that we weren't going to be doing this for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I got some feedback too. Some "where are you" questions.
Right.
Missed
So it's
something.
nice to know someone's paying attention.
Yeah. So.
And it's also good to take a little time off.
Yeah, and I'll do my best to be cognizant of that and announce, because there's going to be times where I take a break and yeah.
Yeah, I think we thought about that after we finished the last podcast.
Yeah.
It's like maybe we should have said something. So
yeah.
I apologize to those of you who are part of this process that we didn't think to do that.
Right. Well, do our best in the future to keep people informed.
Exactly. So as we were chatting a little bit before we started, I did take a week and go to Texas, and my travel was Friday to Friday, which was one of the reasons that we couldn't do this, because Friday is our day to do the recording.
Right.
So I got to go and spend a week with my mother, my 91-year-old mother, who is living with my sister as she is in her serious decline of life. And my sister was on lockdown for almost 14 months with Mom, and it was very, very difficult because she was committed to not allowing any possibility of the virus to come into her house and possibly hurt or even kill my mom. So that was a very noble commitment, but it's also pretty stressful.
Yeah.
When you're stuck with your parent, and your parent's stuck with you,
mm-hmm.
and there's nowhere you can go, and you're dealing with the stress of figuring out how to make life work, the stress of ill health, the stress of isolation. So I was happy to be able to, now that we're all vaccinated, to give my sister a break and spend some time with Mom.
Mm-hmm.
And as is always the case when we undergo anything in our lives, frankly, but most notably when we have a change of environment or change of habit or change of schedule, it's a good way to learn things about ourselves that we may not normally see, because our reticular activating system is habituated to the environment we're in. Mm-hmm. So getting out of my environment was a great way to learn some things about myself and to speculate on how to apply what I've learned.
Right.
And so that's partly why I was looking forward to talking to you to get some feedback. I did share this information at the meetings that I've been at this week, and but actually made a list of the things I learned about myself. And so if you're willing, I'd like to just share a couple of these and see what happens.
Okay.
So, one of the things that you have always talked about is the tendency that we have to, in our unconsciousness, to be needy, manipulative, cruel, and there's two other psychodynamics that are in there. I forget what they are off the top of my head.
Arrogant and entitled.
Arrogant and entitled. Thank you. And I learned something about all of those while I was gone. So the one that jumped out at me is I noticed every night I got to play cribbage with my mom. And I noticed that Mom she would say certain things that are things that she would say. And they were just Mom ways of talking and communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself wanting to do violence to her, emotional violence, in the form of dismissing or disagreeing unnecessarily, or passive aggressive kinds of behaviors. And I noticed the first night as we were playing, I noticed that I just did these things. I just had an awareness of what I was doing. It's like, oh my gosh, not only am I being cruel to this 91-year-old woman unnecessarily, I don't know if there's necessary cruelty, but I was being cruel. But I realized that it was a very old pattern. It felt comfortable and it felt natural and normal to do this to her. And so the first thing that I learned is, again, there's a dynamic of cruelty that I have. I cultivated it in this relationship with her. I'm sure I've done it with other people. It shows up as in sarcasm and other ways to essentially negate someone else's reality. That you have a term of art for that. Change people's reality, I think you say.
Yeah, redefine.
Redefine. Thank you. So there I was doing that. It's like, whoa. So now that I knew a little bit about accountability practice, once I was able to see what I was doing, I just set a new intention. I said, I intend to create a world of kindness and acceptance while I'm here. I intend to create a world of kindness and acceptance. So the way that manifests for me after that is, I noticed the same stuff happened, that she would say something and I would have this, I could see in my mind or feel in my body an impulse to do the same old cruel behavior. And I was able to say, no, I'm not doing that.
Right.
Not going there. Not trying to squelch or alter my own reality. This tendency to be cruel and mean is there.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to change that. What I'm doing is I'm setting an intention to have a different behavior and response.
Yeah.
So in a certain kind of way, interested to see what you say. It's a way, in a certain way, I'm having my cake and eating it too. That is to say, I'm having this impulse to cruelty and I'm not being cruel at the same time.
Right.
So both things are happening. I'm noticing this feeling of impulse to a cruel response, and I'm setting an intention to do something else.
Correct.
So not to be cruel to my cruelty, if you will, not to alter my own reality, which is that I have this feeling of cruelty, but simply to use the power of intention to create something else.
Yep.
So that's one thing that I learned, and maybe I'll stop there and see if you have any comments or thoughts about the specifics or the process.
That's my process also. In '98, I went to a batterers re-education class. They used to call it batterers re-education class. They changed the name to violence intervention.
Right.
And in there, I learned that I was emotionally dismissive, ignoring, and redefining, verbally threatening, raising my voice, or posturing in some way, making myself puff up to intimidate, objectifying, and diminishing. So and sometimes I watch that response internally now, and I simply don't, it doesn't express out loud. Very few and far between now, but as I was learning this process, I would notice, I don't know, 50 times a day where I'd have this impulse to snark or be emotionally or verbally violent. And the process, sometimes I would realize it after, sometimes I would realize it while and do it anyway. And then sometimes I'd realize it and see myself not doing it. And that's part of the change process. It reminds me of, and this is how I put it together for myself. Step 6, became entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Well, to remove them, necessarily I identify them. And that process of identification, oh, there it is again, there it is again, there it is again. Then over a period of time, the times I went to that behavior became minimal. And I would like to say, and I will report when it happens, that they completely go away. If there's a percentage, I went from always emotionally or verbally violent to, let's say, 1% of the time I am. I don't know how to quantify it, but and I notice it when it's there. And I, okay, yeah, that was violent. Own it, be accountable, and then either don't say anything or say something I want to say that's different. Yeah. Yeah.
So for somebody who might be watching this for the first time, I'd just like to point out that what John and I are talking about is actually in the accountability practice itself. And accountability means I account for my behaviors and my thoughts and my internal process. So in this case, I had these thoughts and I did do cruelty to my mom. And the thing that allows me to make something different is my willingness to account for these things without blame or judgment, without making myself bad, wrong, sinful. It's simply what happened. And so the first element of accountability is I account for my behaviors, or I account for my impulses. And at the same time, I account for them without blame or judgment.
Right.
Go ahead.
And part of that is experiencing the feeling of being cruel or mean or sarcastic, however we couch it, violent, and feeling the internal feeling of what that creates internally, and then creating the intent. Is my intent to be kind, or is my intent to be enthusiastic instead of intense? Whatever it's like I say, I just dismiss somebody, and that's not without feeling. And the feeling is the key. When I own the truth without blame or judgment, it allows me to experience the feeling of what I'm creating or what's being created. And I can see that it's in alignment with my childhood trauma, which is relieving for me. It's validation of I was hurt as a child. I was wounded. I was criticized. I was all those things that happened that I had forgotten about, and manifested my own pattern of behavior, which was arrogant, entitled, me, controlling, needy. Yeah.
One of the things we noted in our Rusty Nail meeting this week is the incredible persistence and power of these childhood dynamics, psychodynamics.
Yes.
So here I am, I'm almost 70. So I've been in a relationship with my mother for almost 70 years, and I'm still acting out like a 4-year-old.
Yes.
I'm still having these I'll get you little things that have never, until I sat across from her playing cribbage, they were never disciplined. They were never noted. They were never, they just continued. And there was no intervention from anybody to say, don't do that. Or do you want to take a look at what you're doing here? And so it just was self-reinforced for decades.
The term I used, it became normalized.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting and worth commenting on is what you just said, which is that even those of us who have been doing these practices for a long time, these energies are still present. And the part of the practice here is not to try to resist change, impede those energies, because that's exactly how they got started.
Yeah.
Is through emotional violence done to us, which we then I then learned to do emotional violence to myself and others.
Yes.
So the challenge here is that's why we're so insistent on developing the practice of no blame or judgment. The challenge here is to change our behaviors, not through manipulation, not through violence, not through coercion, but through voluntary appreciation of a better way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the process that you just completed for us, which is to be willing to feel the emotional impact of my behaviors or my thoughts, creates this connection to that original source of the cruelty, the manipulation, the entitlement, the arrogance,
Mm-hmm.
all those dynamics,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can actually be liberated. Oftentimes we talked on the podcast about how that feeling that we get when we finally tell a truth that we've been refusing to own for years and years and years, how the body feels this sense of utter relief and opening. And that's why we do this, so that we can use that sense of freedom and euphoria and truth to create this new intention. So we now we make our body our ally instead of our enemy. My body and my emotional body now becomes my ally in creating the new behavior, the new feeling states that I choose to have consciously as a result of what I learned about myself.
Yes. Yes.
So when I recognized that I was doing little cruel things to my mom, I just looked at this 91-year-old woman, and it's like, whether she was feeling that or not, I could feel it.
Right.
I could put myself in her place and go, holy Jesus, what am I doing?
Right.
This is unnecessary.
Right.
And it was, I've been doing this work long enough to be willing to say that I didn't have blame or judgment when I noticed this. It was more like boom.
Yep.
Just like awareness.
Yeah.
Awareness, emotional impact, hurtful. What do I want? And so the value of sharing this on the podcast is to let folks know that, at least for me, this process really works.
Yeah.
It really leads to the world that I choose to create consciously. I intend to create a world of joy, peace, freedom, and community.
Mm-hmm.
And all four of those showed up when I was able to address the cruelty.
Yes.
I was able to be free of it, free of the compulsion. I was able to create community with my mom. I was able to be happy that these compulsions were no longer present and no longer trying to hurt mom.
Mm-hmm.
And it brought a sense of peace and well-being.
Yeah.
So I had a similar experience. Like, oh, that's not enough. There's more.
Uh-huh.
So one of the things mom likes to do is she has a routine, as is often the case when we get elderly. And one of her element of her routine is sitting in front of the television and watching game shows for several hours a day. And I'm talking Wheel of Fortune, Family Feud, Jeopardy, The Match Game, The Price is Right. These shows have been around forever. So I'm sitting there with her and I'm watching these productions, and I'm like agitated. It's like, these people are doing nothing but standing up and down, jumping up and down, screaming, shouting, and clapping. There's endless noise and music, and the announcers are shouting, and it's all this rev going on, except Jeopardy. Jeopardy is a little more low key, but so I'm sitting there going, this is really stupid. No wonder our country's going to the dogs. Look at this insanity, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next morning, after I got up and sat down to engage in the next day's watching of these things, it occurred to me that I was I was having these opinions and I didn't have to have them. It occurred to me that I was self-agitating, that I was using the excuse of what I was seeing to create agitation and condemnation and criticism and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so then I said, you know what? I don't want this. I don't want this. I intend to create a world of kindness and acceptance.
Yes.
And so there it was again. I was able to notice that I was having a response that was not the issue. Whatever the issue was, and I'll be honest, I never really identified the issue. Usually when I'm feeling agitated, I'm just feeling unloved. But I knew that I was responding from an old habitual pattern, and I noticed that pattern, and I just decided I don't want it right now. So again, just the way the process has worked for me, it's allowing me a much shorter time between the compulsive reaction, the habitual reaction, the normalized reaction, and my awareness that I'm doing this, that I'm engaging in this reaction. And the awareness then leads to, well, what do I want? Is this what I want? And if it's not, what do I want? Right. And to set an intention.
There you go.
So I'm not saying I had to go all the way to Houston to learn this, but I went all the way to Houston to learn this. So something else that I learned, this wasn't the result of anything specific. This was the result of musing on patterns of behavior. And it started when something happened as I was leaving the house to go to the airport. And I had arranged the night before for a taxi to pick me up at a time certain so that I could get to the airport, and it wasn't there. It didn't show up. And so I was upset, and I then tried to get an Uber, and there wasn't an Uber available. So I ended up having to drive myself to the airport and spend all kinds of money on parking that I wasn't planning on spending. And I noticed that upsetness comes in part, and I'd just love to have your feedback on this, in part because I actually have an ongoing scripter that is subconsciously scripting every moment before it happens. And when the script is violated by reality, I feel entitled to be pissed off because the script is supposed to happen the way I've written it.
Yep.
And so it's like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this constantly. I'm always creating, this was the insight, I'm always creating a script that I believe subconsciously I'm entitled to have come true the way I scripted it.
Yep.
And so anything, it can be something small. Like just before I sat down here at the dining room table, I knocked my leg into the table leg and it hurt. And it's like, I had not scripted knocking my leg into the table leg, nor had I scripted getting hurt. So I was pissed off. It's like, so this is just something I've noticed. It's like a new insight. I don't know what I'm going to do with it except to monitor whenever the expectations are violated, because I'd like to appreciate this mechanism more, because the mechanism's there for my good. The capacity to pre-script everything is a necessary and useful tool. The power of imagination is a major gift. And I don't know that any other creature on the planet has it besides humans. So just, I'll stop there and see if you have any thoughts or reflections.
Well, it is an expectation, and any expectation is a pre-planned resentment. And I'm getting what you say about being able to foresee or use imagination and set up timelines and or things that may come in the future. It's holding on to the expectation that it follows my pattern, my idea of right. When you're talking and when I'm speaking to you, my thing in this is efficiency. Don't you know I am the most efficient person on the planet? I know the quickest, easiest way to set a table. And it's like, watch me, because I'm about ready to show you a profound way for you to save time. And it's like, I found myself like you did in this on a trip home from a meeting, and it was gone. There was I actually got to experience myself in my vehicle going down the road at ease. And it was beautiful. It's like, oh my God. And that same thing dawned on me. I'm doing this all the time. I'm doing this when I go to the mailbox. It's like, what's the most efficient way to get to the mail, pick it up without any problems? And then when I fumble or the mail's crooked or crinked, and I'm like, what the hell? Don't this guy know how to put in the mail in the mailbox so somebody can efficiently get it? It's like, and that all was subconscious. And my irritation, agitation, otherwise annoyed, was that built in. For me, it's like this efficient movement. I'm efficient at what I do. And I've since created the intent to be in the flow. And yeah.
So, yeah. So as you were sharing, it occurred to me one option here is to be willing to let my script be violated.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I'm willing to let my script be violated. Oh, even just saying that feels, oh, I'm not sure that's actually true. I don't know that I'm willing for that.
Here's my statement that assists me through this. Nothing happens to me. Right, everything happens for me. Even my capacity to pull out an intact package of mail from the mailbox. It's like without dropping them or fumbling or anyway, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the thing to appreciate here is that this is entirely natural. And this process is part of our human psychic / brain configuration. And we can't stop it. It's not like it's like we'd say, we're always wanting something. It's like you can't not want. And we also can't not project into the future.
Right.
There's the book we may have talked about this before, Norman Deutsch's book, The Brain That Changes Itself.
Yeah.
He shows how research has demonstrated how this process actually works.
Mm-hmm.
In one of the early chapters, he talks about when we walk, the brain is actually forecasting each step before we actually take it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's part of the deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's that sense of entitlement, that subconscious sense of entitlement, that the script should be followed no matter what. I like your insights. Like, my efficiency should be maintained no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it doesn't, it's like I take it personally.
Mm-hmm. And lauded. Everybody should notice and say, "Oh, John, you're great. I'm gonna keep my eye on you because you're gonna like show me how to do this life really cool." Yeah.
That's a special twist.
What's coming to my mind, it came to my mind a couple of times as we were talking, is an agreement I made in that violence intervention group I was in it was a year-long group, and I found myself in it for a year and a half, I agree to disclose 100% of what I need 100% of the time with no expectation of getting it.
Right.
And at first, when I heard that, it was nonsensical. It just didn't even make sense to me. It's like, shut up, you know, quit embarrassing yourself, because that was like really stupid. And yet I find myself, oh my God, that is such a freeing. And what I've learned is that everything I need is in the disclosure of what I need. Not that I get it. The disclosure of what I need, the disclosure of what I need is validating to me. And I'm the only one that can hold that validation at the internal level. It works in all kinds of situations in my life. So even in going getting the mail and taking the shortest, quickest, fastest, I only, you know, so many steps. And anyway.
So those are some of the things I wanted to share with us. I'm interested, of course, in anything that you've been thinking about or discovering, and since I talked to you last, or anything people have brought to you that you've been thinking about.
Well, I've thought about the question we addressed last time. Do people get sex mixed up with love?
Wow.
And then our conversation about it, that's at the core of who we are as a product of a dysfunctional family. Having received the childhood trauma that I received, I am not connected to me. And the trauma works really hard to keep me disassociated from me because it's too painful. So that works into every aspect of my life, including my sexuality. Me doing my internal work allows me to grapple with this question, just to simply address this question. I've been doing men's groups for 25 years, and the subject of our sexuality has come, I can count them on one hand how many times it's come up. And it's a very deep-seated, under the radar dilemma that is at the core of our wounding, my wounding. I won't say my wounding, specific to me. And that the availability to openness and freedom and exploring my sexuality is a part of life that I've missed out on most of my life, and that it's part of me integrating all aspects of myself. When we talk about sex, we're thinking gender, depending on heterosexual, gay, but it's this masculine energy, feminine energy, and that masculine energy, feminine energy, I'm doing this, my head is the masculine, the consciousness. The feminine is the feeling part of me. As a man, this aspect of me has been blocked. We're told, be tough, don't cry, buck up, don't be weak. Well, in my intuitive feeling body, this heart space has been guarded. I don't know, most of the men that come to me, I could say, have a broken heart. And that space is, if we're talking about energies, the feminine part of ourselves. When I first got into men's work, they said, embrace that feminine side. Well, you know, that's the last thing I wanted to do. No, I'm a man. And I was adamant about, I want to express in my male body. And I want to express masculine, and owning the feminine part of me is like, it's something I need to acquire. it's actually my connection to my emotional body, which I had no idea at the time. Now I understand that it's this opening of this heart space. And I was listening to a talk by Rudolf Steiner, and in men it's the heart wounding. In women it's the willpower, or the power center, the gut. They feel it in their gut. We feel this trauma, and I want to say this makes sense to me. And because I'm saying this, there's a continuum, and everybody has a different experience. Me opening my heart center with a woman who has, well, me doing my healing work, and it's not just my family of origin. Steiner talks about this being an intergenerational race consciousness dilemma, and it's been passed on through our ancestors, and it's now time. We're in, because our ancestors, we're standing on the backs of our ancestors because they did what they did and how they did it, so that you and I can sit here and have this conversation at this level. So, and I intend to do that work, to do whatever this work is, to open this heart space, or this, and I talk about all the time, our subconscious pool of information, that subjective part of ourselves is the feminine energy. It's the creative source. It's the womb of creation. And as a human being, man or woman, we have these two aspects of ourselves: the masculine conscious, feminine manifestation. So when I reconcile that in me, and open up to my humanity as a male, I can then enjoy connecting to another individual. And the fact that our sexual, well, what do we call it? We call it the war of the sexes. Well, no, okay, that's an internal war with me. It goes over into my relationships with women, and it has nothing to do with gender. It has to do with this internal healing that I now understand that is my charge, or what I intend to do is heal internally, and then see what happens. So I wanted to say that about our last podcast.
Cool, thank you. Well, it did occur to me after we finished that the issue is not the issue.
Right.
And well, so what I heard you say today is an attempt to, a commitment to getting to the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And how the challenge is, this is the human challenge as I've seen it, as I've been writing my book. It's that dichotomy in the title of Ted Rubin's book, Self-Hate and Compassion.
Mm-hmm.
It's this internal civil war that we have, that as I've listened to people talk about it, the most persuasive observation to me is that this is all driven by the fact that we die.
Mm-hmm.
And that death seems to be a failure of some kind. It's like, and therefore there's something wrong with me, because in spite of all of the great things I can do in life, including reproduce,
mm-hmm.
including let the species continue, let through my own particular DNA, blah, 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 it's still a failure because I'm going to die.
Right.
And so I hate myself, I hate life, I hate the world, because this is ultimately a swindle of some kind. And so let's say there's some validity to that perspective. It can therefore almost immediately bring up compassion. It's like compassion for the fact that it's this way. And not only is it this way, but it's this way for everybody. And not only is it this way for everybody, but it's been this way forever.
Yeah.
And so this is almost a version of the feminine masculine, in the sense that another understanding of this dichotomy is that the feminine is the embodied reality, and as you said, the masculine is the ascendant consciousness that comes from the embodied. This is the thing that we struggle with. It actually arises from the embodied reality, from the material universe itself. And these two things actually are partners, and they work together. And that again, accountability helps me be open to this integration, because until I'm aware of my emotional, bodily, embodied truth, fact, I'm only half there. And that creates an ally in my internal civil war. Like, there's something wrong, and it's my fault. I'm to blame. I'm a sinner. I'm going to hell, etc., etc. Okay, is that true? And accountability, it's really impossible to overstate this, John. I'm not saying accountability is the only way anyone can ever get to this, but the invitation to return to the feeling body is what changed my life. And then being willing to stick with it, because it's not, like you were saying for yourself, I think I heard you say this, it's not in my habit. It's my habit is to, and it's still true today, my habit is not to pay attention to how I'm feeling in any given moment. I have to choose to do that.
Yes.
It's like I'm still walking around in masculine consciousness predominantly. Nothing wrong. I'm not saying there's anything wrong here. But where'd you go?
Go on. Yeah, just go on. I gotta fix something out in the main room. I'll be right back.
Okay, I'm going to put us on pause. Okay, it's nice to see that you've seen the light, John.
Yeah, I got the light back.
Return to the light.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point I think I was making is that the capacity to just be in my body and to experience it and appreciate it has made all the difference, because it's allowed this, what I call the internal civil war, to start healing, to start coming to actual peace. It's like the embodied reality is the same thing from a spiritual perspective as the light, as the consciousness. It's all one. And that it's developmental that we go through this sense that they're not.
Right. Yeah.
And that, as I've said many times, accountability is a process that advances the human experience such that we move toward, and we move toward integration. It's a method to move toward an experience integration, not integration as a thought, but integration as an embodied experience that our mind can then comment on after it happens. And the mind can explain it and all that kind of stuff, and that's fine. But it's already happened as an insight or an intuition through this. Again, when I'm sitting there playing cribbage with my mom and I realize that I'm being cruel, I'm in my body. I'm feeling the impact of my behavior, and I'm in healing, because my mind and my body are now working together to create the world I want.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's my experience of this is the recognition that I am powerful, and that I matter. What I do, how I do it, impacts not only myself but the people around me. So I'm mindful. I become mindful of this creative power that I have through intent, or through, as a child, picking up information that's somebody else's, like my mom and my dad's information about who they saw in me. And then their projection onto me. And that's that intergenerational carrying it on. I can stop in the least, which is huge, stop that. And then see what happens.
You know, it's also worth contemplating the relationship that I just picked up on, use the word creation, the relationship between creativity and sexuality. Because after all, our sexuality is designed to create the species.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons it's so powerful and so pleasurable, because somehow nature decided that this is the most important thing we can do. And from a physical, physiological, psychological perspective, there's no pleasure greater than sexual intercourse. And that's why we're driven to do it. Nature's like, you know, I'm going to make sure we get reproduced here. But for human beings, it's way more than simply biology.
Right.
And that's, I think, where we're still learning, and we're still in a fairly early stage of learning about this stuff, because I can't speak for other cultures, but in the Western culture, we certainly have commodified sex by pornography and the relationship between pornography and drug use. I mean, there's a whole series of behaviors that we've indulged in. Again, nothing wrong, no blame, no shame, but it's information that is worth contemplating to see what is it we can learn about ourselves. One of the things that I've noticed in facilitating meetings, when people get to the point in the accountability practice, and we ask, what do you want? There's a resistance among many of us to wanting joy and happiness. And oftentimes people will say, what? So you might say, oh, so do you mean you want to feel good? You want to feel happy? You want to feel joyful? How about exuberant? And people will say, you know, it feels wrong to say that. And that, I think about that in relationship to orgasm and the pleasures and joys of sex itself, as if, again, something wrong, something untoward.
Right.
And so again, just to take a look at, to return to the embodied, energetic, what's going on, as a place to start. And so for me, as I look at it, I said earlier in the podcast that oftentimes when I feel agitated or angry or whatever, I'm feeling unloved. And I think that's exactly the same thing that happens in sexuality. Is that it's not that I confuse love and sex, it's that I don't know how to ask for what I want.
Right. Wow. Wow.
And so if I'm in a sexual relationship with someone, I may already have a hard enough time asking for love, just love. And now we've got sex, and I don't know how to ask, or I'm afraid to ask for what I want there, as if what I want won't be granted any more than the love I want. And so as a practice, one of the practices that I've learned in the process is that when I'm feeling unloved is to just ask for it. And asking for it is something very simple. Like I might pick up the phone and I might say to you, I'm feeling unloved. Can you give me a minute? Yeah. And usually that's enough.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't even have to say anything.
Right.
Because I already created an act of love for myself by picking up the phone.
Yeah, that's an example of disclose 100%. What I need in the disclosure itself is the validation. Right. Whether you get it or not, you've validated yourself, you've paid attention, nurtured yourself. And that's what you're asking for, is to be nurtured,
Right.
appreciated, attention. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
And if I'm really paying attention, I'll notice how I feel when I do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, how's the emotional body responding? What's it giving me?
Right.
And it's usually giving me some form of happiness,
Mm-hmm.
joy, fun. Like, oh yeah, fun.
What I've discovered is the feeling that I've been stuffing and the feelings I'm afraid of are actually the feelings associated with alive,
Yes.
being alive, that were chastised, abused, ridiculed, humiliated as a child. So the trigger for being disassociated or associated some other place is that the feeling of alive, is open, free, all those things I say I want, and yet when they come, I find myself cringing, which doesn't make any sense. Then the judgment and the blame and the rationalization of why that's going on, and I got plenty of people tell me how the flesh is weak, and do this and you'll be okay. No. Okay.
Yeah. And here we are, 2021, year of our Lord, year of our consciousness, 2021. And we're just being willing to play with it, to learn about it. There's such a infinity of learning to go.
Yeah. My what just came up for me is it's been 2021 years for us to maybe get an inkling of what Christ's message was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is love God above all, love, in honoring self, you honor his creation, and love thy neighbor as thyself. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And as I said in my talk at my church last Sunday, the creator is in the creation.
Yep.
The creator and the creation are one activity. And so that when I love God, I'm loving myself and my neighbor.
Yes.
But I like the way Jesus set it up as two different things because of the embodiment, because there's an actual self to pay attention to and to love, not some disembodied God out there,
right,
which is unfortunately the way we conceptualize this.
right.
And so Jesus is actually showing us some really powerful wisdom, which is if you want to love God, love yourself, and love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Right.
Because it's all one activity.
Mm-hmm.
Love is indivisible.
Yep.
We were talking last night in the Rusty Nail meeting about setting an intention to love oneself and love others. And I pointed out that the minute I love myself, I'm automatically loving others.
Yeah.
Because love is indivisible. And because of projection, when I love myself, I'm projecting love outward. I can't imprison love inside myself. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
Love is an opening process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, 2,000 years to start to learn some of this stuff. I don't think that's all that long compared to the age of the universe.
Yeah, it's just a drop in the bucket, a blink of an eye. Yeah. So,
if that.
Yeah, we're doing well. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, John, it's coming up on the hour. I'm so glad to get back together with you, and I've missed you. And as always, I'd like to leave you with the last word.
Yeah, and I'm having this conversation. I'm talking about what internal with me. I'm having this conversation about, do we get sex mixed up with love? Not to solve the problem, but to open the conversation.
Yes.
And in the dialogue, there will, it's, I don't know. And in this dialogue, I will come to an understanding I couldn't come to any other way unless I chose to engage in the conversation. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
What is it that, I don't know if it was Jung or whoever said the power's in the question.
Sounds like Jung.
Yeah, let's say it. Let's say it's Carl Jung.
Yeah.
Let somebody out there knows who said that. Let us know.
Yeah, I agree.
So before we wrap up, I just, as always, like to let people know that we'd love to have you check out the accountability practice for yourself. It's not an intellectual exercise, but it's a get down and dirty with yourself work. We have several meetings that you can join, all by Zoom still. There's a Rusty Nail Club meets on Monday and Thursday nights at 6:30 Pacific time. There's a cave meeting of the cave, which is a men's accountability group, on Tuesday nights at 6. And then John facilitates digging in the dirt on Saturday mornings at 8:30. These are all Pacific time, and they're open to anybody. At the end of the podcast, John's and my email addresses will be listed. So if you want to find out how to get access to any of these meetings, please shoot us a note. We'll be happy to let you know. In the meantime, we'll do this again next week. And then we're going to take the week off after that. The first Friday in July, I'm going back to Houston.
Okay.
So this time, everybody a couple weeks heads up.
Okay. Good. Good.
All right. Thanks, John.
All right, Marty.
Have a great weekend.
Okay. You too.
Thank you.